You're listening to an archived Cabral Concept podcast. After listening to this show, check out the most up-to-date podcasts available at stephencabral.com/podcasts or search directly on iTunes. And now, welcome to the Cabral Concept, where board-certified naturopath and integrative health practitioner Dr. Stephen Cabral shares how he was diagnosed at the age of 17 with a life-altering illness and given no hope for recovery. It was only after studying and traveling all over the world did he discover how to combine ancient Ayurvedic healing practices with state-of-the-art naturopathic and functional medicine to fully rebalance the body and re-energize it with life. It's time to discover how to get well, lose weight, and finally feel alive again. And now, here's your host, Dr. Stephen Cabral.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the show. We are about to get started on our Total Wellness Tuesday show, and today's topic, I believe, is a great one. We are going to go over 8 factors that absolutely affect your longevity and can predict an early death regardless of genetics. Now, I know it's an intense topic, but once you hear all 8 items, you know, just like on some of my previous podcasts about the 10 causes of early mortality, I go through step by step what they are. And I'll link up that show actually on today's podcast. So today's podcast is episode 1201. We've broke the 1200 mark. We did that yesterday on our Mindset and Motivation Monday. That was my favorite shows and one of my favorite shows in a long time. And the reason is that I went through a 5-step process that I use myself and that I've used with many thousands of people and taught that in my practice. So episode 1201, go to stephencabral.com/1201. And what I'm going to do is link up a lot of these 8 practices to previous podcasts. So these are 8 things that are absolutely within your control. I don't want to give you anything that's outside of your control, but I want you to be able to regulate all 8 of these. And if you can regulate all 8, which I know that you can, you are going to give yourself a much better chance to live a long life, but also a better quality of life. Too many people get fixated on the number and not enough on the quality. It really should be about the quality of life, because after the age of about 50, the majority of Americans are walking around on some type of medication, right? We've got like essentially the walking dead. We've got people being held together by pharmaceuticals that if they weren't on them, the entire body would self-destruct, would fall apart. But because they're on those pharmaceuticals, not everyone, but many people are not living their optimal life. They're still suffering from those symptoms. They still have the underlying inflammation. And the pharmaceuticals are simply masking a lot of the end results of those underlying root causes. Well, let's go through 8 of those factors today, 8 of those predictors today that absolutely will help you to live a longer life. Because I don't want to talk about an early death. I want to talk about living a long, healthy life. That's what it's all about. So the first one is this. Hands down, there seems to be nothing better than keeping your body at an ideal weight for you. Part of this has to do with your frame. We call it your body type or your dosha in Ayurveda. And I've talked about this on my previous, I'm going to get more into Ayurvedic shows in the future because Ayurveda is not being taught correctly in the United States right now. It's not. People are, I don't know what they're doing to it, but it's not Ayurveda. It's not true Ayurveda. Everyone's a Vata body type apparently. Well, yeah, of course, if you're looking at it from a mindset perspective. We need to talk about the frame of the individual. The mindset is part of the overall prakriti, but not the entire thing. We need to look at the frame of the body, right? So yes, some people will be 5'8" and they'll weigh 180 pounds. More of the kapha-based body type. Larger calves naturally. Larger forearms, more of a round head, more robust body. The ectomorph, they're 5'8". That person might weigh 115 pounds, 120 pounds. That's their normal frame, normal structure. Mesomorph, maybe somewhere right around 150 pounds, 155 pounds at 5'8", right, for that person. Male and female will differ. What I look at is it right for that person, but also, do they still fall within a healthy BMI? Because most people should. They really should. 99.9. And again, when I was doing a lot of fitness back before, we always talked it was about body fat, this and that. But after doing, 10,000 people's body fat, you start to see, yeah, but most people who aren't within the healthy BMI also are over the 18% body fat for men and 22% for women. So, yeah, I mean, if they got it down, they would be within a healthy BMI. So really the only people who don't fit within the healthy BMI are those people with a lot more body mass on their body. I'm talking muscle. And that's very, very few. Now, remember, the more muscle you have in your body also, though, can be a hindrance in terms of longevity. You make your heart work harder. You make the whole body work harder. You make kidneys work harder, typically eating more food to keep all that muscle on. So remember, and I talked about that on a previous podcast as well. So what I want you to realize is this. One of the number one things that you can do is keep your body within the 19 to 24.9 BMI. Now, at my height, I'm about 5'8", and my weight, somewhere in the low to mid 160s, probably in the mid 160s, usually between like 164 or so, 167 pounds. I'm at the higher end of the BMI. Now, I'm not overweight. I try to stay lean, but part of it is that my build, my frame, has a decent amount of muscle in my legs, a decent amount of muscle. I mean, I do exercise and I can lose weight, but it keeps me at the higher end. But I don't want to go too high. And what that would do is actually then put me at more of a risk because of what I would have to do for early death. I'd have to eat more protein. I would have to eat more food in general. And we know that one of the best ways to live a longer, healthier life is to actually eat a little bit less. Always. If we can decide on one thing of what absolutely helps you live longer, it's eating less. Not too little. You don't want to be too catabolic, but eating less. All right. So that's the first one. And if you want to find your BMI, head on over to stephencabral.com/1201. We'll link up that episode. Make it easy for you today. Or, as always, you can go to stephencabral.com/podcasts and type in your specific keyword. Okay. The second one is waist to hip ratio. Waist to hip ratio is you take your measurement of your hips. Stand with your feet about 3 inches apart. Make it easy on yourself. Take a floppy tape measure or even just a piece of string, and then you can put it against a tape measure. And you want to measure the widest part of your hips. Pull it around your hips. What is it? 40 inches, whatever it is. And then measure right around your belly button, your navel, right? Just measure right around, straight line. What is it? Just divide your waist by the hips. And you want to find out what your waist hip ratio is. Again, I did a podcast on this. Okay? 0.95 for men, 0.8 for women. So we want to look at that, right? We want to look at that in terms of risk factors because that's a huge one. It will let you know your risk factors for cardiovascular-based disease, for certain types of cancer. Really important. I did a whole podcast on that. We'll try to find that, link it up at 1201 today, all right? Really important one. Now, for me, if I start to gain weight, my body loves putting weight on around the middle. It loves putting weight on around the chest and armpit area. My body would prefer not to even put it on anywhere else. Just put it right around there. So for me, I know I have to be careful because if I like to overindulge in some type of desserts or carbohydrates or whatever it might be, I'll start to put it on around there for sure. And a lot of people do. But for me, it doesn't seem to go to my legs, doesn't seem to go to my arms, but it likes to go around my stomach. So that's what we do. We make sure that we have a healthy waist-hip ratio. Extremely important. Because remember, if your BMI is on the higher side, make sure your waist-hip ratio is on the ideal side. All right. The next one, something even a little bit easier. Now, I know it's hard if you've already started, but easy not to begin. Don't smoke. One of the easiest ways to give yourself cancer, cardiovascular issues, metabolic syndrome, high blood pressure, etc., is to smoke. Thousands and thousands of percent increased risk if you smoke. Don't smoke. Not even a cigarette a day. Not 2 a day. None. 0. And vaping is not better for you. And I'll do a podcast on that soon. If you have a loved one and they've switched to vaping, vaping is not healthier for you. If you are breathing in smoke and carcinogens into your lungs, it's not healthy for you. No matter how you slice it, it's just not healthy. Don't smoke. Do not smoke. If there's one thing you could do, it would be not to smoke. It's huge. Now, something that goes right along with smoking, this was actually the correlation what the study was, is eating processed meat as bad as smoking cigarettes? And the answer, based on the percentage of death, seemed to be yes. based on the amount of cancer, seemed to be yes. If you like to eat processed meat, fried meats, salami, and bacon, and these types of things, and yes, you can tell me that it's nitrate-free and all of those things. It's a different story. If we're just talking about like fresh meat, although I'll get to that in a second, it's a different story. I'm talking about processed meats. Bologna, ham, all of those things. American cheese, we'll count that as well. Absolutely increasing your chances of cancer, especially if you're frying that. A lot of people, they're like, oh no, I like to cook in bacon and the bacon grease. I like to fry it up, make it nice and crispy. Absolutely, absolutely increasing your risk of cancer. There's no doubt about that. Don't let anyone try to convince you otherwise. I get a little upset about those types of things because when people give those recommendations, they're taking people's health into their own hands and saying that it's okay. It's not okay. It will not kill everyone. I'm not saying that. But it will kill a lot of people. And I don't want you to be one of them. The other part is this. Don't make meat more than 19% of your diet. I'm not saying you can't eat meat. I'm not saying you can't eat some fish. What I'm saying is don't make flesh food more than 19% of your diet. That goes for any type of protein. Really good studies on this. I did a podcast called The Mounting Evidence Against Meat. I've done a few podcasts on this. I'm not saying that you can't eat it. I'm not. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying is you make your diet meat-focused, which I used to do, especially trying to do bodybuilding. Every meal revolved around a protein, not a carb, not vegetables, not fruit, not a healthy fat. It always revolved around a protein when I was trying to put on a lot of muscle. And again, I can't say it didn't work. I was able to do these things, not in the smartest way, but I committed to it and I was focused on it. I've said this before. Ham steaks for breakfast with eggs. I would do chicken pre-made for lunch. All of everything was meal prepped. Dinner would have been, it was never fish. I was never even eating healthy like that, but it might have been steak or something like that, burgers. And then I was doing protein shakes in between. And I'm not saying it didn't work. Was I getting healthier because of it? Absolutely not. And the studies now show more than 19% of your diet, especially for meat, very unhealthy, increases your risk of cancer. And I've given you all the reasons why. Again, it's not an opinion of mine. Meat is an anabolic food. We know that from Ayurveda. It's a good thing, and it can help for a lot of people who are more catabolic. But the problem is we can't give it to everybody, and you don't have to have it. What I'm saying is that it increases IGF-1. The higher your IGF-1 levels, the higher your chance. Doesn't mean you're going to get it, but the higher your chance of getting cancer. All right, the next one is this. Alcohol. Not saying you can't drink alcohol. I'm just not saying you can drink it every night. It is not going to. Don't let anybody fool you with all these funny little studies saying, oh, no, a couple drinks a day is good for you. It's not. It is absolutely not. Alcohol, make no mistake about it, is a poison to the body. It is a poison to the body. Just because we're doing a little less of it doesn't make it not a poison. It makes it less of a poison. Because if you drank 30 drinks, you might not be with us anymore. But if you drink 3, yeah, you'll be okay. Maybe a little headache the next day. Depends on, I guess, how conditioned you are at drinking. But here's the thing. You'll be dramatically healthier if you don't drink more than 2 to 3 drinks per week. And I gave a Friday review research study on that as well. We'll see if we can dig that one up. Great study. Really great study. 2 to 3 drinks a week. That is where the fall off starts. After 2 to 3 drinks per week, we start to get the fall off. And for anyone with an ApoE genotype, an allele that has a 4 in it, drinking alcohol at all is detrimental. Again, even if you have one of those 4s, it does not mean that you're automatically going to get cardiovascular disease, have a heart attack, get Alzheimer's, etc. It just means that you're more prone. So, one thing that I've just learned, especially about myself, is since I have one of those, I say, alcohol, I can have 1 drink, no big deal. Start to have a couple in a few days in a row, not so good. Have more than a couple in one night, not so good. Am I okay the next day? Yes. Do I feel a little less pep in my step? Yes. What about some brain fog? Yeah, not as clear thinking. Can I do without it? I can. Do I typically do without it? I do. And I feel better because of it. Better sleep, better energy, better mind, better mood, better quality of life. As I talked about on yesterday's podcast, it was one of those things I had to give up. I haven't given it up completely. Every once in a while, when I decide to, I don't plan the date, but when I decide to, sure, I'll have a drink. That's it. But I don't plan for it, and it's not too often. The less alcohol, the healthier you are. And I talked about, I mentioned this yesterday, but I did an interview with Melissa Ambrosini on this topic. If you want to check it out, we'll link it up today, 12:01. So remember, a lot of blue zones, they had a little bit of alcohol. But I want to key phrase here, a little bit of alcohol. And they had a few dinners a week, community, relatives coming over, enjoying. People made food together. Different story. Reduced stress, relaxation. Drinking a drink, not doing yourself any good. The next one is this. What does your blood sugar level look like? Easy to do. Very easy to do. You can buy one of those $20 glucometers, right? Talk about it all the time. You can take your waking blood sugar. Easy to do. Should be between 75 and 90 ideally. 95 at the highest. You'll know if you're regulating blood sugar, overnight especially, which is the most important time. I'll talk about that just in a second. But also, when you run your annual blood work with your doctor, you can simply ask, can you run my fasting glucose? It's typically part of the blood work that you should run anyways. I did a podcast on this as well. What to ask for on your blood work from your doctor. Easy to look at. Make sure that's regulated. 95, not ideal. 98, definitely not ideal. But your doctor's not going to say anything to you because it's still within normal in air quotes, measures. But it means that you're moving towards more oxidation in the body, more most likely vision-based problems, more neuropathy, more cellular membrane-based issues. All sorts of issues that happen around dysregulated glucose or blood sugar. Problems with your pancreas. It could be all sorts of issues. What does it stem from? Oftentimes, a lot of processed food, eating too often, having too much fructose, which means from processed food again, not from fruit. It's an issue. Again, you can overeat on a lot of the high fructose foods, but most people don't. Most people get the fructose from alcohol. Really important to look at. All right. The seventh one is this. I believe it's number 7. Evening cortisol. We talked about AM glucose. Well, what about the evening cortisol? The way that you can test this is a very simple at-home saliva test. It's called the adrenal hormone test. If you want to add the thyroid numbers onto it with vitamin D, insulin, and glucose, or hemoglobin A1C, it's called the thyroid adrenal hormone. Either way, you get your nighttime cortisol. So important. If your evening cortisol is elevated, you are most likely not getting into deep rejuvenating sleep. Most likely your lifespan will decrease if you don't get enough rejuvenating sleep. Also, you are more prone to catabolism, to breakdown. That includes in the brain, that includes the body, that includes muscle tissue, all of those issues, cells. So we want to make sure that evening cortisol is low so we don't burn out brain cells. We know one of the factors leading to Alzheimer's is increased cortisol, especially in the evening when it should be low. Why? Because if evening cortisol is high, melatonin is not high. Cortisol at night should be low. Melatonin at night should be high. Upon waking, cortisol should be high. Not out of range, but higher. Melatonin should be low. That's how the normal diurnal rhythm of the body works. If it does not work, it's considered dysfunctional. And if it's dysfunctional, you will not lead and live the healthiest and longest life you can. Evening cortisol, it's a number you need to know. All right, because it's so easy to correct as well. All of these things are correctable. Every single one of them. Every single one of them. And I have a podcast on each one of them. All right, the last one is this, blood pressure. Blood pressure is something within your control. And if it's not fixed, again, we can lead to neuropathy, cardiovascular issues, which can lead to heart attacks, can lead to strokes, can lead to aneurysms, can lead to blood clots, all sorts of issues. So we need to keep that blood pressure in check. What does that mean? Well, typically 120 over 80, right? What else could it be? 110 over 70? I don't like it to go too much below 70. People can start to feel weak, be a lack of electrolyte balance in the body. And I don't want to see it above 125, 130. And I don't want to see that bottom diastolic number over 85. All right? So the max I like to see is 130 over 85, but ideally lower. 120 over 80, that's our gold standard. 110 over 70, I'm okay with that too. Not too much below and definitely not above. What does it mean? Well, when you have higher blood pressure, it means basically there's more constriction, there's more closing down, there's more tension on those arteries. And if that happens, it's a recipe for disaster. Poor circulation, poor blood flow, poor elimination of waste, poor nutrients to the cells. And again, the major issues, which are the major killers: heart attack, stroke, and then again, leading to other things as well, as typically they all go together as metabolic syndrome, which is the cholesterol, blood pressure, being overweight, and the type 2 diabetes. Important. All of them, they have a connection. People say it's inflammation. I don't disagree. But you know what causes inflammation? Dysregulated blood sugar, higher levels of cortisol. And I did a show on that as well. How cortisol affects inflammation, which affects the immune system and affects weight gain. All of them are connected, right? Because your body is not a set of separate systems. It's an interconnected system, one interconnected system. Everything works together. So all of these things are within your control. You can fix your weight. You can fix the waist-hip ratio. That will happen most likely with the weight loss. You can stop smoking if you're currently smoking right now. If you're not smoking right now, don't start vaping. Don't start any of these new techniques that people are doing. Don't eat processed meat. Cut back dramatically if you are right now. Even if it's one of your favorite things, charcuterie boards or anything like that, cut back. Make your diet less than 20% protein. It doesn't have to be zero. I'm not saying zero, just less than 20%. Alcohol, don't drink nightly. Don't drink nightly. 2 to 3 drinks a week. AM glucose, make sure it's between 75 and 90 ideally. Evening cortisol, if you run the adrenal hormone, you run a saliva test, make sure that it's between 0.4 and 0.6 ideally, not above a 0.7, even though it's within range. And then blood pressure, let's make sure that blood pressure is somewhere between 110 to 125 for the systolic, and the diastolic number, which is the bottom number, the smaller one typically, it should be between 70 and 85. If you do those things, you've done so much in terms of living a longer and healthier life. Thank you so much for tuning into another Total Wellness Tuesday. I appreciate you. Appreciate your downloads, your shares, your listens, your reviews. If this show is helpful, do feel free to share it with anyone else you believe it could serve. Before you go, I wanted to ask you this question. What if I could teach you in just a couple of hours how to transform your thyroid, hormones, adrenal, cholesterol, blood pressure, blood sugar, weight loss, energy, mood, brain, pregnancy, anti-aging, or many other health-related issues? After 20 years in private practice, after seeing and overseeing 250,000 client appointments, I sincerely feel I have the real-world data and have found the answer you've been searching for. So what I've done is spent hundreds of hours of my own time refining what you need to know in order to uncover your underlying root cause health issues and then begin to rebalance the body and bring it back to a state of robust health and wellness. I'm going to teach you exactly what I do in my private practice so you can understand how you got here and now what you need to do in order to heal. You'll receive all of the important success checklists, protocols, and even ways to customize it to make the program fit your busy life. And you'll get all of this at a fraction of the price. Let me save you the time, money, energy, stress, and frustration of not knowing what to do next. Instead of reading dozens of books on the topic and seeing multiple practitioners, I will condense everything that you need to know in just a few hours of video tutorials that you can watch and listen to anywhere. Together, we will make this healing process an enjoyable one that you can take with you for the rest of your life. I wish you all of the best of health and happiness, and I hope to be able to guide you on your healing journey through my Health Results Accelerators. Simply choose the health imbalance you're currently suffering from, and by the end of today, you'll know what went wrong and how to get well again. I guarantee it. For details, head over now to stephencabral.com/courses.